Hi, this is
Okay.
Mark Arnold at Fun Ideas Podcast, and we have yet another special guest. Today we have Christopher Priest, who, if you don't know him, you might know him under the name of Jim Owsley, but he worked for Marvel Comics and for DC Comics, and we're going to interview him about that and a few other things, including what you see in the background, Obnoxia the Clown and the Nebbish, Crazy Magazine. So. How are you today, sir?
Hey, I'm doing great, Mark. How are you?
I'm fine. Um, so I guess I was doing a little research on you, and if you don't want to cover this, that's fine. But why the name change? Why did you change your name? Is there any specific reason, or it just says different time in my life I need to j change my name?
Well, I'm a fugitive from the law, obviously.
Oh,
Um, yeah. It really has nothing to do with comics. It was just a personal decision, and just at some point, I just wanted to make a change in my life, and it's just amazing that it's been like this matter of curiosity. I mean, this was 30 years ago. Um, now women change their names all the time.
yeah.
When they get married, they get divorced or whatever the story is. But when a man changes his name, then it becomes like this, mysterious.
Why did you do it?
It's real, yeah, it's really not that mysterious. It was just, I did not have a big attachment to my family name and
hmm
nobody could pronounce it and nobody could spell it. And,
hmm
I was just kind of sick of it. So I got divorced in 1993. And as people tend to do when they go through a horrible breakup, um, we go out, we buy a sports car, and we change our name. So there you go.
Fair enough. Yeah. I guess the reason
She
I
changed
asked
her
is
name. Why can't I change
yeah,
my name?
yeah, exactly. Well, just because you've had years of credits with the other name, so I'm
Yeah,
like,
I didn't I didn't take professional considerations into it. It really
Mhm.
didn't enter in, and it really didn't become a problem until initially DC Comics refused to list me in the catalog as Christopher Priest
Hmm.
because they thought that I was trying to market off of the British science fiction author by the same name.
Hmm.
And I had to, go in there and let them know, look, it's not a pen name.
Yeah,
Somebody just put up I don't know, somebody on YouTube just put up something that said something about you know, um, suggested that Christopher Priest is Jim Owsley's pen name. Neither one is a pen name,
right.
okay? And Christopher Priest is the name on my birth certificate, if that makes any difference.
Yeah,
So, it's just one of those things.
yeah. Fair enough. That's all I wanted to say about that. I really wanted to cover
Sure.
your career, but it's like it was kind of the way if you look on Wikipedia, among other things, not saying that's totally accurate all the time, it kind of keeps it a mystery like it. And I said, well, I'll ask about it.
Well,
And
the weird thing about Wikipedia is that Wikipedia does not allow the subject to edit their own page, which I
yeah,
find very bizarre
yeah,
because I am the guy that you're talking about, and I'm like, okay, this is wrong, that's wrong, that wrong, the
right,
chronology here
right.
is wrong. This happened before that, that happened before that, and then I'll get like some pushback from Wikipedia. So I have to go through a third party
Yeah,
or I have to post it somewhere like in your interview or whatever and reference that and
right.
then they'll somehow it's a little I
Yeah,
understand why they do it, but it's a little bizarre that the person that like that Bill Clinton could not edit his own Wikipedia page.
right. I guess then you start putting a bunch of garbage up here, it's like I don't know
Yeah.
what you would put, but I have a Wikipedia page too, but it took some doing getting it. And the reason why I have one is just because I was getting confused with other Mark Arnolds because my name is about as bland as
Yeah.
John Smith, so
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
um I
I
was
also have an Instagram page, and just for anyone who sees it, that's not me. I don't even know how to use Instagram.
oh,
So apparently, a fan or maybe someone who despises me would take your
yeah.
pick. Somebody put the
Well,
Instagram
that's a
page
different
up.
matter. Yeah, that's different than
Yeah,
Wikipedia. Wikipedia, you can have imposters, but anyway. I
yeah.
mean, not Wikipedia. I mean, the other way around.
Instagram.
Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah. So just letting you know that that's not me. I'm not on social media at all. I don't have a
Right.
Facebook page. I don't have an Instagram account. I'm
hmm
an I'm an old guy who just like, I'm hoping to skate by and enter the afterlife without ever having been on social media.
Right. Um, so let's just, I guess, before you got into the comic book industry, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you grew up, how you developed your interests, and did you work at Marvel Comics first? Was that your first professional cred, or did you do other stuff before that?
Well, that was like my first, real job, I guess, because I was 17 years old when I was hired by Jim Shooter. So I was brought on as an intern in high school.
Mm,
And then I became like this freelancer where I was doing proofreading and whatever little scut work there was to have. And then an editor named Bob Lakin, who was
Oh, you
the
mean
editor of
Paul Lake?
Crazy.
Paul Lakin?
Sorry,
You mean Paul Lakin? Sorry.
was it Paul Lakin?
Yeah.
I thought it was Robert Lakin.
No, the I had to
Maybe
interrupt
I'm
you.
confusing him with Robert Layton. Maybe
Bob,
there's
yeah, there's Bob Layton or Robert Layton and Bob Larkin who did the Crazy Magazine covers, and then Paul
That's what
Lakin.
I'm
So
doing.
okay,
Okay.
Paul Lakin was the editor. Okay, sorry.
Okay, so let's
Continue.
let's 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 clean that
All
up.
right,
So it was
take two.
Paul. I'm sorry. So Paul Lakin.
Mm,
Wow. So I've been saying Bob for many years now. Paul Lakin worked out of his house,
mm,
and he needed somebody in the office to traffic the pages when the pages came in from the artist, and they needed to get moved down to production, and they needed to be taken over to Chemical Color. They're the people who used to make the film. We used to use this thing called film to
yeah.
to create comic books. So there was a lot of like, trafficking
Hmm.
that really didn't require him to be in the office, but he needed a body and a set of hands to run the office. So
Right.
after my internship ended, I don't know who recommended me to Paul, but somebody, I think it was Nelson Yomtov, if I had to guess. Nelson was a colorist and a very good drummer who worked with Larry Hama.
Mm,
Nelson may have recommended me to Paul, and that became my sort of after school gig. And I was coming to Marvel after the internship ended. I came to Marvel every day after school, and I ran Paul's office for him.
mm.
And that's pretty much how I got started with Crazy.
Wow. Now for the next few years, you just solely worked on Crazy, or did you also work on any other titles?
Well, I think for the next year or two, I'll have to go back and check my chronology.
Uh,
But the first year or two, Paul eventually either left or was replaced by Larry Hama. I don't know the circumstances, but at
okay.
some point, Larry Hama, took over Crazy Magazine as the editor, and Jim Shooter. This is my understanding. This is what I was told by Jim Shooter, not necessarily directly from Larry himself,
Mm,
but Jim Shooter introduced me to Larry and said, "Well, this is the kid that's been running Paul's office." And Jim was kind of my rabbi, so Jim was always kind of sort of very supportive, and he was teaching me how to write, and so I think he was, making a case to Larry to keep me on.
mm,
And at some point, I got to meet Larry. And at some point, Larry asked me, "Well, how much is Paul paying you?" And I said, "Well, Paul is paying me like $50 a month, And Larry started laughing. And
mm,
again, this is how I was told by Shooter, not by Larry, but that Larry went to Jim Shooter and said, and he started laughing like with that Larry Hama sort of giggle,
mhm,
you know,
mhm.
$50 a month, that kid is a walking lawsuit, you know. I mean, he's a little black kid, the only black person wandering around here, and you're only paying him $50 a month. So he
Yeah.
went to Shooter and said, "Look, I'll keep him on, but you have to actually hire him. You have to stop screwing around. You have to actually, you have to pay this guy."
Mm.
So Larry was the guy that kind of, got me an official,
Well, that's good.
like officially hired by Warner Brothers with the whole Warner Brother ID, and and of course the paycheck was not much more than $50 a month, but it,
$52.
it was more. And I became an official staffer. So that's
Mhm.
that's pretty much how all that began.
All right. Um, I guess the question that's always asked, I'm sure, is what was it like working for Crazy? I know in the early years you just said, it's like you're just doing everything by yourself with Paul at his home. Did you ever meet Paul, or did you only talk to him like over the phone or whatever?
It was mostly over the phone, but I did see him whenever obviously when he came into the office. So,
Okay, so he did
you
come in
know,
occasionally. Okay.
yeah, but when Paul was the editor, I had no creative input on I was a production assistant.
Okay.
So all I was doing was just kind of like, shuttling pages back and forth between the Marvel bullpen, which is the
Mm,
production office, and then taking it over to the Chemical Color where they created the film.
right.
Larry, on the other hand, made me a creative partner
Hmm.
where, Larry uh, and I'm not really sure why he did that, but thank God he did. Um, I think the first thing Larry did was he wanted me to come up with an ad parody for those awful back in the days, back in the silver age of comics, they used to sell these seahorses. They had
Yeah.
these little ads in the comic books for live seahorses,
Right.
and he was like, well, let's do, some sort of, ad parody.
Hmm.
And he let me take a pass at that. And I think that was the first bit of writing that I did for
Okay.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And then from there, he and I were kind of occasionally a team. Larry didn't really his it wasn't his responsibility to produce content for the book,
Hmm.
but as you know, in any sort of publishing situation, sooner
Hmm.
or later there's going to be people who miss deadlines or things don't show up.
Right.
And in those days it was pre-digital, so it wasn't like there was no email, there was no downloading from a server. Everything was slow moving paper sent by FedEx or the post office.
Yeah.
So there were occasions where things didn't show up. And, like there was once, I forgot what happened, but there was a a page or two that didn't show up. And Larry just like, we had to ship the book out. So Larry just stopped everything and he went to the art store down the block and he bought himself some clay. Yes, some clay. And he comes back with this big can of clay here. And he sits there in the office and he crafts a giant cartoony cockroach out of
Yeah.
the out of the, out of, out of the clay, and then we got Elliot Brown, famous photographer now for Marvel. I mean, he was our house photographer, pretty much.
Hmm.
Elliot Brown came in and he lit it and all this other stuff. And Larry created this ad for the Roach Motel because the
Yep.
Roach Motel
I
was a
remember
big
that.
thing.
Yep.
So it's a parody of the Roach Motel ad. I believe I wrote the copy or I co-wrote it with Larry, but it was for me as a kid, as a 19-year-old kid, it was amazing to see how talented this man was, that with his hands, yeah, I knew he could draw. I didn't know he could sculpt, that
Hmm.
he could take this lump of nothing, that
Hmm.
that at 9 o'clock in the morning, we had nothing. We had a blank page.
Wow.
And by the end of the day, we shipped the book out with this terrific, hilarious ad that
Hmm.
that he created the cockroach. We shot it, we typeset it, we created the cockroach, we wrote it, we shot the photography, we had it all typeset, and out the door it went by the end of the day. And that's what it was like working for Crazy Magazine.
Wow. It looks like at Crazy, I kind of wrote down some of the articles you did. I did write down sea baboons, which is the one you were referring to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what you called it. Um, and it was just a one-page ad on the back cover of one of the issues. I don't remember which one, but it looks like you did like three distinct types of features, and I was wanting you to talk about each one. One was, I think, Larry Hama created, which is Teen Hulk, and you wrote a
Mhm.
lot of those, if not all of them. I think you wrote majority of them, if not. Were you assigned to do that, or you just said, "Oh, Teen Hulk, I want to get my hands on that. Let me take a stab at that," or whatever?
I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure Teen Hulk was Larry's idea,
Yep.
and that he
Yep.
worked with Maurice Severin, and Maurice Severin and Larry created the character, and then Larry assigned it to me to write.
Okay.
So I think they had the concept of Teen Hulk, but beyond that, it was like, all on me to kind of, I had a very free hand in terms of, how to
Okay.
make this,
And you
make
could
that
take it
work.
any direction you wanted, just pretty much.
Yeah, if you want to call it that, the
Yeah.
direction. Yeah, all right. It
Because
was
there was
just
no real
silliness.
continuity to it. Well, there was
Yeah,
kind of, sort of, but it's like, yeah, it was mainly just, an excuse to get Teen Hulk to Hulk out at some point.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
what.
And it was beautiful art. I mean,
Yeah.
Marie was just beautiful art, and
Hmm.
she actually drew me into one of these segments. Can I tell you a quick Marie story? Can I
For
chase a
sure. Of
rabbit for a second
course.
here?
Yeah, yeah.
So this is before Larry got there.
Hmm.
So I'm still an intern. I'm 17 or 18 years old. And at some point, I was working for all the editors there, and I was skating around and and Marvel was like chaos in those days. So I was fully engulfed in the chaos. So one day, Marie Severin, who's like the nicest lady in the world, she comes up. She was the art director at the time. She comes
Right.
out of her office with this big smile, and she goes, "Jim, could you come in here for a second?" I went, "Oh yeah, sure." So I just skate on into Marie's office. What can I do you for? What do you need? And she closes the door and she turns to me. She goes, "Okay, listen to me, you little shit." Okay, nobody wants you here. Nobody likes you. Nobody wants you here.
Wow.
Basically, I was being pretty obnoxious. And the reason I was being pretty obnoxious is that I was working for a fellow named Ralph Macchio. Now, Ralph Macchio, as we speak, as we sit, is one of my uncles in the business and a dear friend whom I love to death. And I'm so happy
Mm.
whenever I get a chance to see Ralph. So take this, in context that like, I adore Ralph Macchio, but Ralph was kind of a jerk, and I was taking on Ralph's personality working for
Ooh.
Ralph. But I'm the 17-year-old kid who just got here, and I'm running around being snotty to Roger Stern and
Ooh.
Marv Wolfman or whoever,
Yeah, yeah.
and people were talking and going, "Look, we want to get rid of this kid." So
Wow.
Marie just she closed the door, which was nice of her because she could have did it in the bullpen. She
Right.
closed the door and she reads me the riot act. And
Yeah.
Mark, Marie saved me. I would not be here. I would not have been in this business
Hmm.
if it wasn't for Marie Severin, who, because everybody wanted to get rid of me, and they were all complaining about
Wow.
this snotty kid, and I immediately cleaned up my act after that, and I loved her to death, and
Wow.
and I miss her terribly.
Yeah. Never talked to her, but I always admired her work at Marvel and at EC and other places and everything like that. And I always wished I could have spoken to her and met her, but just never
She was
happened.
hilarious. She
Yeah.
was so much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm a big Harvey Comics fan, so one of the things that I always liked that she said is when Warren Kremer worked there for Star Comics, he says, nobody knows this, but that's the greatest artist that ever walked through these doors, And I said,
Wow.
yes, yes,
Wow.
because everybody thinks, Jack Kirby or Steve
Right.
Ditko or blah, blah, and it's like
Right.
the
Yeah.
unsung Warren Kremer up on her list. So anyway. Back to the recurring features. Here's one, and you did this many, 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 many times, and I'm wondering if this is similar to the cockroach thing. Is you take older, like Journey into Mystery or whatever, Strange Tales comic stories like Fin Fam Foom, Creatures in the Volcano, and things like that, and rewrite the dialogue. Which, as a teenager and young adult, I found that hilarious. But how did those start?
Well, again, that was Larry's idea. They were called Marvel Retread Funnies.
Yeah.
I'm surprised they never did a collection of them. They just didn't put them all together and put out a trade,
Hmm.
on that. And I think the idea was Larry. I think before we got there, Crazy was mostly about Forbush Man, and Forbush Man was uh, kind of a victim, kind of almost like Alfred E. Newman or something, where he was just kind of maybe Stan Lee thought he was funny or thought that was a
Hmm.
good idea. And with all due respect to Stan, another dear friend, a guy that I knew and I loved dearly.
Hmm.
But Forrest Man was a victim. And Larry comes in, and I think that was the point he made to me. The first point he made to me was that we have to have a better mascot,
Yeah, well, that's
and we
not,
we didn't want a victim.
actually,
We
yeah.
wanted a perpetrator
Yeah,
because we
yeah.
think the perpetrator is funnier,
Hmm.
than the victim,
Hmm.
So uh uh also in addition to like changing the mascot, I think Larry wanted to distinguish Crazy Magazine, not just emulate Mad or Cracked,
Hmm.
but okay, this is a Marvel book. How do we exploit that? How do we make this more Marvel? And one of the ways that we could do that was that we had access to the Marvel library. So why not get our can of white out, blank out these balloons and have some fun with it. I mean, Larry encouraged me to write.
Mhm.
He could have just let me, and again, due respect to Mr. Lakin, it wasn't Mr. Lakin's job to
Mhm.
teach me to write or to bring me along as a creator or a creative person. But Larry just decided that's what he wanted to do was to go, all right, let's see what this kid's got. Let's see if, so he would throw a lot of this stuff my way and ask me to dive in and take a whack at it. And he means the world to me. He's like a father figure to me.
Okay. Then the third version, or the third thing you tended to do, um, is just straight on parodies of things, and but they were always kind of teeter.
Mean-spirited.
Well, I wasn't going to say that. I was going to say teetering on the edge of possibly bad taste or or something like that. Maybe
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
It's like, especially now since everything's all PC and everything like that.
yeah,
You did. But as a kid and teenager, I love these things. I love crazy. I love crazy better than mad. Even back in the Hama days, there, I thought you were
yeah,
really going somewhere. So you did things like the Brownstones and Richie
yeah,
Rich and.
yeah.
Uh, the Black Knight, well, that was another rewrite, but it was one. Now you were actually Dr. Jive Turkey. That's your other alter
That's
ego,
right.
correct? Okay, yeah, that's what we thought, but yeah,
Yeah, and I think that there was I forgot what it was, but there was something. It was like in those days, Marvel was very un-PC, so there were a
yeah,
lot of Italian jokes and there are Irish jokes and there's very sexist jokes, a lot of sexism, a lot of that kind of thing. Um, Oddly enough, there were no Polish jokes. I wonder why there were no Polish jokes. But nobody was safe.
yeah,
So if there came like racist jokes or jokes that could feel like they were racist, you know, on the one hand, I would kind of take offense, but on the other hand, I'd go, yeah, but everybody got it evenly. There was
yeah,
no one was safe at Marvel,
hmm,
particularly Ralph. Ralph was the class clown. So Ralph would make fun of everybody. And as soon as you left Ralph's office, he would talk about you. Yet everybody knew it. So we just like, okay, we love Ralph for who he is. And
hmm,
this is his modus operandi. And I accept the fact that I know when I left the office, the guy was going to, have some jokes at my expense. The flip side, though, is that when I was in Ralph's office, when nobody was in there, when it was just me and Ralph, and he had no audience to perform for, he was a completely different person. He was very kind and thoughtful. He spent a lot of time talking to me about story, teaching, advising, that kind of thing. Despite the fact that, Ralph would he'd have these, you know, fairly racist newspaper clippings or things taped to
wow,
his door.
uh-huh,
And and it's easy for people to point at it and go, well, Ralph's a racist. And I went, but if you look at it again,
hmm,
and look at it closely, you realize, okay, no, he's not complaining about black people. He's complaining about Michael Sphinx. He couldn't stand Michael Sphinx, and he couldn't stand. There was a couple other boxers that he just hated, and so they were really kind of targeted at individuals and
hmm,
it really had less to do with whether they were black or white or whatever the story was. It was
hmm,
just like he was taking umbrage at
hmm,
whatever he was ranting about at the time.
right,
Um, but I am satisfied, and uh, I'm sure that I'm sure that the man loved me, because
yeah,
he was exceptionally kind to me when he really didn't have to.
hmm,
Now, he had to keep that a secret because if people knew how kind he was, his whole suit of armor would fall off. The whole
yeah, I know
Matthew
people like
Perry,
that, yeah, yeah,
the Chandler Bing,
hmm,
that was the kind of personality he had. It's kind
hmm,
of like wisecracking, that kind of thing. But when nobody was looking, the guy was very kind, and he'd buy me lunch and give me
hmm.
advice, and a lot of us would hang out in Ralph's office. At any rate, so at some point I said something about racism, to Larry, and I forgot what the context was, but it was something that was happening, and maybe I was getting pissed off about it. There was something that happened, or somebody said something, I forgot what it was.
Mm,
And Larry sat me down and he said, look, Jim, you have to understand something. You can't be in this business. And by this business, he means the humor business.
yeah.
Whether you're a stand-up comedian or whether you're doing a humor magazine or whatever it is, you can't be in this business and be thin-skinned.
Yeah.
You have to be able to take a joke as well as give a joke, and you can't be afraid to make fun of yourself,
Mm,
or your own culture or whatever the story was.
mhm,
And it was a good lesson to have where I just went, okay, I kind of get it now. And and that kind of freed me up to do things like the Brownstones, whatever. And the Brownstones, we were getting ready to send this book out. So we had all the original art packaged up, and it was all ready to go over to Chemical for film to transfer to be shot for film.
mm,
And so we have the whole package sitting on Larry's desk. And Larry gets behind his desk and he puts his feet up on his desk and he lights up a cigarette. Now, back in those days, you could smoke in the office.
mm,
Okay, this is back in the day.
yeah.
And Larry didn't. He wasn't really a big smoker. The only time I ever saw him smoke was when he was like, really stressed.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's probably stressed about this feature.
So he puts his feet up on the desk and he lights up a cigarette and he takes a drag of the cigarette and he looks over at me and he goes, you do realize we could both be fired for this. And he really thought about it for a minute, and then he went, fuck it, and send it off, but yeah, he took that moment of pause because he thought, this time we've gone too far.
Yeah.
Um, and Mark, long story short, Marvel did not receive even one complaint about the
Yeah.
Brownstones, not a
Yeah.
single one.
That's
Everybody thought it
funny.
was hilarious.
Yeah. But I think that's why he put that Jive Turkey intros, so
Oh,
hopefully
definitely.
to, ease the pain, as it were. But to me, I thought
Yeah.
it was just an hysterical opening, a hysterical parody, and it's like, hey,
Well,
we move on from there.
the
Yeah.
Jive Turkey thing served two purposes. One was to let them know this was written by a black guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's number one. Number
Yeah.
two, it was like, to take some of the pressure off and go, I mean, if you really read the Brownstone story instead of just reacting to it off the cuff as we would now,
Yeah.
like if it hit Twitter or something now, people would be like clutching their pearls. But if you
Yeah.
actually read it, it's really kind of like, it's not like making fun of black people, it's taking shots at racism itself and
Right.
how unfair a lot of things were and some continue to be in this country.
Right.
At face value, yes, it's incredibly racist and offensive, but that's kind of the point. But if you
Yeah.
actually read it, you get it. Oh, okay, I get what the subtext of this comedy piece.
Yeah. It's similar in vein to like Blazing Saddles. It's
Oh
like if you
yeah,
just see it on surface, it's like, oh, it's N-word, N-word, N-word. But it's like if
right.
you under the surface, then you go, there's a message here. We're supposed to treat everyone equally with respect. And
Excuse me
you
while I whip
know,
this. Yes, excuse me while I whip this out.
yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah,
it's like, and that was the culture then, and that's why I appreciated it because I like that type of stuff because it had an underlying message. It wasn't just, you know, pow, 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 make fun of, make fun of, make fun of, but there's no
yeah,
purpose behind it. It was, like I think sometimes like you never, or you and Larry never went as far as say Lampoon on some things where National Lampoon would go so far is that they were just making fun of other races and other ethnicities or whatever
right,
just for the sake of it. There wasn't any
right,
real purpose to
right.
it.
There was no moral to the story.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was like, let's just make fun of people because we have a magazine we can,
yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
okay, all
Because we can.
right. Um, Parlaying off of that, it also says on Wikipedia that you were the first black editor of mainstream comics. Did you know this at the time, or were you aware of this, or did you find out later and say, "Oh, maybe I was. I didn't think about it."
I'm pretty sure I found out not only later, but I think I found out much later. And
Yeah.
at the time, the whole race thing it wasn't on my radar. I was just happy to be there. I loved being at Marvel Comics. I
Hmm.
was excited every day that I could get to work, and yeah, it was just a wonderful opportunity to be there and to grow up because I literally if you think about it, I literally came of age,
Hmm.
at Marvel Comics, and I was very excited to be there. So, uh, when Jim Shooter was more or less forced to to promote me to editor, because God knows I got passed over by Ann Nesenti and I got passed over by Bob Harris. All these people started after me. And then
Hmm.
Mike Carlin, who Larry and I helped get a job at Marvel.
Hmm.
We're the ones who talked Shooter into not Shooter, Mark Gruenwald, the late Mark Gruenwald, into hiring him. And he was promoted over me. There was this reluctance to actually promote me, and I think again. I can't say for sure I wasn't there, but it's entirely likely that Larry had a closed door meeting, had a frank discussion with Shooter to get me finally promoted. It's like, you can't keep passing this guy over. He's been here
Yeah.
7 years. You got to give him a
Yep.
shot,
Yep.
you know. So yeah, so I had no really inkling about any of that until like much later. And
Hmm.
and and even now, I'll meet people at conventions like, "Oh, you were a trailblazer and you were standing up for us." And I was like, "No, no, I was just trying to pay the rent. I had no clue."
Fair
I
enough.
was
That's
I was just
fine.
enjoying myself.
Yeah.
It was a magical place. It was
Yeah.
I can't underscore this enough, Mark, that whatever you were reading in the bullpen bulletins, and it had that, Stan Lee's voice. I don't know if all that was actually Stan, but they were certainly writing that editorial in that Stan Lee, that classic Stan Lee voice,
Hmm.
and it had this kind of wacky tone to it. That was Marvel. Marvel was a wacky place. It was
Hmm.
just like utter chaos. And you had like the sixth floor, uh which was where the editorial was. And then you had the ninth floor, which is where the executive floor is. Now you went up there and it was like a morgue. You don't want to go up there. I occasionally had to go up there just to take an interoffice envelope up there. I had to do some scut work to go up and down the stairs there. But I nobody wanted to go up there because they just had no sense of humor about anything. And then you
Hmm.
go down to the sixth floor where editorial was, and it was just a zoo and it was just fun from dawn to dusk. And you know, most offices are open 9 to 5. Marvel was open 9 to 5. Nobody ever showed up at 9. Shooter would kind of get on us about coming in by 9 o'clock. And that would last a week or two, and then they'd fall back into just wandering in whenever they wanted to. But the flip side is nobody left at 5. That was a complete fallacy. Most people were working until like they would work until the day until the work got out the door. And if
Yeah.
that was 8, if that was 9, sometimes, I'd go up there on the weekend and there's people there. Like there's people there all weekend farting around up there trying to fight a deadline or whatever the story. And it's the biggest party in the world. It's pizza, there's music, and people are drawing and painting and whatever they're doing, trying to
Yeah.
get the books out. Marvel was it was
Yeah.
an amazing experience. And now Marvel, when I visit Marvel's offices now, it's all like the ninth floor in those days. It's
Hmm.
all very corporate and
Hmm.
it's very quiet. It's like a library up there. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, welcome to Marvel Comics, and they've
Right.
got like, they got like this glassed in reception, and you have to get buzzed in. And like, here's this reception. She's looking at me like, yes, can I help you? And she has no idea who I am. And it's like, she's and I'm like, help me? Can I help you? I
Yeah.
helped build this place,
I used to work
and
there.
I'm Jim Owsley. Let me in,
Uh,
I have to be escorted, and, you got to show your ID down in the
uh,
lobby just to get to the elevator. And it's
yeah.
just the world. It's not just Marvel. The world has gotten so weird. And
Yeah.
that's the whole culture has changed. But back in the days that you're talking about, the crazy magazine days,
Yeah.
Mark, it was such a blessing.
Yeah.
I can't thank everybody who worked there and who put up with me
Yeah.
enough.
Well, it came through on the books, not just crazy, but I mean,
Yeah,
you were doing, not you personally, but Marvel, was doing during the 70s, like all those black and white magazines, like
yep. Tomb of
Tales of
Dracula.
the Zombie or
Yeah.
whatever, yeah, and then Howard the Duck and just crazy ideas like that that just came across as like we're trying to be innovative and different and
And then Archie
special.
Goodwin launched Epic Illustrated.
Yeah,
Remember
that
Epic
one too.
Illustrated,
Yes, oh yeah,
which was just gorgeous.
Yeah.
unbelievable. And then they did like Rampaging Hulk or something,
Yeah.
that with this, full process color that we had never seen before.
Hmm.
And it
Hmm.
was exciting times back
Yeah.
then. Yeah.
So it came across on the page because I was just a reader and I was like, wow, this is really neat. Ooh, wow, and
Yeah.
I envisioned it a little different than it actually is because, you always think of, but I'm sure Stan Lee wanted to get that across. It says, Marvel bullpen, like everybody came into the office, but a lot of freelancers just mailed their stuff in and it wasn't that exciting, but as a
Yeah.
kid, you go, oh, it must be a party there, let's
But
go.
but local
Yeah.
freelancers usually came into the office. They'd
Yeah.
come into the
Yeah.
office if for no other reason than to pick up their check.
Right.
And the offices in those days were wide open. You didn't need an appointment. I was the
Mhm.
first, maybe the first editor who started asking freelancers to please make an appointment, and it irritated them. And I became like notorious for that. Like, what a a-hole this guy is
Yeah.
asking me. And I said, look, it's not even that I want you to make an appointment. At least call me and tell me you're coming in so I can either I or my assistant can be prepared for you because we'd be in the
Right.
middle of something or we'd be in a meeting or whatever the story is, and all of a sudden there's five guys in our office,
Yeah.
and I go, I couldn't get anything done
Right.
because it was just the party was so unrelenting.
Hmm. Other things at Marvel, I guess I'll just read off the different characters and then you can tell me if you have any impressions of it. Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah, they took our crazy away.
Yeah.
At some point. Now, mind you, today Crazy would have been a runaway hit. I think we were selling like 150, maybe 200,000 copies a
Yeah,
month.
that's about right. Yeah.
And that wasn't enough. In those days, that was like, borderline. And I think at the time, they were trying to clear press time because they only have so many slots on the presses to run these books. They were trying to clear press time for the new universe. So a
Hmm.
bunch of things got canceled, but Crazy was certainly one of them. And we Larry was handed the Conan books. So
Hmm.
I told Larry, well, it's been fun. And I'm gonna, my plan was to stick with Crazy until it got canceled, and then I would I would go on to college. And my mom wanted me to be a lawyer, so I thought that's my destiny was I had to go be a lawyer.
Hmm.
So it was Larry who talked me into staying, and
Hmm.
Larry said something that I hear his voice to this day, because like I'm doing this series called Sonya Reborn. Speaking of
Hmm.
Conan, which is like a Red Sonja series that nobody seems to like. I will go off on that tangent, but there's a reasons for it. Nobody seems to like Sonya Reborn. So we did six of them. I had planned a 12 issue story arc, but apparently we won't be returning for the second half of the story, which is really disappointing.
Hmm.
And I heard Larry's voice today, when Dynamite said we're not going to continue the series. I heard what Larry told me when Crazy was canceled and they gave us Conan. I didn't want to do Conan. I didn't know anything about Conan. And he said, Jim, you learn to love what you do. You know,
Hmm.
um, it's like, you give it a chance. Uh, it's just this is the nature of publishing. It's like, we're creative people, um, and our creativity is very close to our sense of ourselves. So when a book gets canceled, it feels like a rejection of us, not just the product, but of us personally. So I think that he was trying to make the point that it's a weird business. Any type of creative business is a weird business because in order for you to be creative, Mark, you have to invest yourself emotionally in whatever it is you're doing.
Hmm.
However, in order to be a responsible publisher, the responsible publisher's first mission is to keep the lights on in the
Yeah.
building. Okay. So you have to balance that against, you asking these people to take little pieces of themselves and invest and come up with something as wildly inventive as, the new X-Men or whatever the story is.
Right.
So yeah, Larry asked me to stick around. He gave me a bunch of Robert E. Howard novels, and short stories collections, so I started reading some of that stuff to get acclimated to it. But it took a while. It took quite a while for me to warm up to
Mm,
to Conan the Barbarian. But I eventually I did,
mhm,
and eventually for reasons known only to Larry,
mhm.
he assigned me the main Conan book, and I started writing Conan the Barbarian, and it was awful. It was so bad. I have no. It was just terrible, you know. But people remember that run fondly. They just did two, not one, two omnibuses
Yeah.
of Jim Owsley Conan, and I'm like, are you people crazy? Excuse me, pardon the pun, crazy. You know, are you people nuts? You know, but then I got the sales figures back, and like they did very well.
Yeah.
These omnibuses and Dark Horse reprinted this stuff, Marvel's reprinted this stuff, you know, and I'm like, really? You know, I was like, I was the worst Conan writer ever in the history of Conan.
That's
Oh,
funny. Did you ever work with Larry on G.I. Joe, or did you just part ways at that point?
no, I was in the office
Okay.
when this whole phenomenon, started to come about, and Larry
Hmm.
would come in with these sketches, and I would look over his shoulder and see what he was doing.
Hmm.
But I was not really, it wasn't our
Hmm.
book, so we weren't editing the book out of
Oh,
our
okay.
office. So I had no hands-on,
Got it.
but I was aware of what he was doing. And I think that at the time, neither Larry nor Marvel nor Hasbro nor whoever had any idea that this thing would take off the way it did, and
Right.
that it would just have this kind of
Yeah.
sustaining
Yeah.
power.
It just seems like that's as revered as your Conan nowadays. They've
Yeah, well,
reprinted
that's
that
because yeah, I didn't write it. He wrote
numerous
it. Yeah,
times. Yeah.
yeah.
Let's see. He also worked on Falcon for a while and Spider-Man and Power Man. Do you have any memories of those particular characters for?
Well, most of that was like training exercises, but Jim Shooter was training a bunch of us to write. Kurt Busiek and Len Kaminsky, myself, a couple other people that were coming through who wanted to break in and be writers. So I wrote a lot of stuff that was really bad, you know, but I wrote like, you know, some Iron Man and Thor and some
Yeah.
other stuff that ended up being shelved until I think Joe Orlando was the licensing vice president there that would package this stuff for Walmart. You remember those bagged comics or
Oh
those
yeah, yeah,
special
yeah,
editions
yeah.
that would go out to retail outlets that were outside of the
Hmm.
distribution chain that and so he would burn off a lot of that inventory through those other channels. And but it afforded Jim the opportunity to teach, to teach people how to write or to teach people
Okay.
how to do things. So the Falcon was one of those gigs that was he said, okay, well, I had done a couple of other things. I'd done a few other characters, and he said, okay, well, why don't you go and write a Falcon story? I said, okay. So I went off and I wrote this Falcon story, and then he gave it to this new kid who wanted to try out, who had come in with his portfolio. He gave it to this kid, Paul Smith,
Mm.
So Paul comes in with the pages, and it just blows everybody's mind. It
Well.
was like it's unbelievable. So Jim takes Xeroxes of Paul's pencils and distributes them to the editors, and immediately the editors start offering Paul work, and they start snatching them up for Doctor Strange, and ultimately, of course, X-Men and whatever else. And became, I mean, his career just took off. Now, these pages that Jim was showing around were not lettered. So
Mm.
nobody could read the story. So they didn't know who wrote the story. They didn't care who wrote the story.
Yeah.
They were just tripping out on Paul. So his
Hmm.
career took off and mine never did.
Oh.
Um, and then the Spider-Man stuff, at some point I became the Spider-Man editor quite serendipitously because nobody else wanted the job. That's literally true. Nobody wanted to
Wow.
take over the Spider-Man franchise, so I ended up with it. That became a very calamitous history there that I've recounted in the last two Marvel Masterworks, Spider-Man Masterworks, the last two that came out. They both have introductions written by me that kind of tell the sordid tale of my life as Spider-Man editor. Um, and then post Spider-Man, I was given a writing contract, so they paid me more money to stay home than I was making coming into the office. And I started writing Web of Spider-Man, and then I was writing Amazing Spider-Man over Tom DeFalco's plots. So that's kind of how that came to be. I also did something called Spider-Man versus Wolverine, which is probably the best. writing I've ever done. I've spent 40 years trying to write a better story.
Mm-hmm.
It was a one shot. It sold a gazillion copies, and I got that quite by accident. We were at a editorial meeting, and Jim was berating the editors on like, we're not getting enough use out of the characters,
Mm,
because the editors were very competitive with one another, and the Fantastic Four people wanted to keep their characters over here, and the Avengers people wanted to keep their characters over there, and Doctor Strange's character was over in Ralph's office, and they weren't really cooperating very much, and Jim was like, we should be, doing more with these characters. We should be doing something like, oh, I don't know, like Spider-Man versus Wolverine. And he pivots to me because I'm the Spider-Man editor, and he goes, Jim, you make that happen, you know. And I said the one smart thing that I've ever said in this business in the
yeah.
47 years that I've been in this, the one smart thing that I actually said was I interrupted Jim and said, you know what, Jim? Actually, I'd rather write that than edit it. And Jim said, okay, fine, you write it. And he pivots around to Ann Nocenti and goes, and you edit it. And Ann, her eyes pop open wide, like, how did I get sucked into this?
Mm,
Because nobody, and I do, Mark, I do mean nobody
yeah.
at that stage in my career would have offered me a top level book like that.
Hmm.
Um, and I was determined to write the hell out of that book and to prove that to get to do a book that people would actually read and
Yeah.
that they would actually like look at and go, wow, this Owsley guy actually can write. And
Hmm.
I think we did a great job. The late Mark Bright, my Quantum and Woody partner, he drew the thing. Al Williamson inked it. It was gorgeous.
Mm,
Uh, Again, we sold a gajillion copies of it. They went back for a second printing. It was a really big hit, and nobody ever. It was just crickets.
mm,
Mark and I thought like, this is it. This is our ticket. We have a big hit. Now we're going to get offered X-Men or Avengers. We're going to be offered like real work. No, that never happened.
mm.
There was, the common refrain was, well, anybody could write a hit book with Spider-Man and Wolverine, and I went, it's
Wow.
actually a good book. It's actually a
Yeah.
very good book, but it's part of my ongoing, chagrin in this business that
Yeah.
uh for one reason or another, and the reasons keep changing.
Yeah.
At some point it was like, well, there was backlash against Shooter because, there was nobody likes Shooter was like the new sheriff in town. Nobody likes authority figures.
Yeah.
Marvel was like this land of chaos, and Jim was making order out of chaos, and that made him a magnet for people, people's gripes or people's whatever their issues were.
Hmm.
So I was kind of Jim's protege. So
Hmm.
that was part of the reason why, despite Spider-Man and Wolverine, I never got, you know, a shot at anything,
Yeah.
and then beyond that, there was, like, I don't know, every year or every decade, there's another there's another reason, why. Oh, well,
Hmm.
we're not offering you that because like for 8 years in the aughts, like from 2005 or whatever to 2017,
Hmm.
whatever that was, I was only offered black characters,
Mm.
you know. And women were only offered women characters, and lesbians were only offered lesbian characters, and Catholic priests were only offered Catholic priest characters. It was just stupid.
Yeah.
And then they were bringing over all these people from TV because there was a writer's strike, or whatever, and these guys were hungry, and they came over and they
Yeah.
said, "Look, we can write comic books." They sucked at writing comic book. It was an
Yeah.
insult to every comic book writer
Yeah.
to bring these TV people in and so forth.
Hmm.
So every iteration, there was another excuse, and the latest excuse is, well, you don't know our continuity. That's why we're not offering you, Banana Man or whatever the story is.
Hmm.
And I'm like, well, I don't know your continuity because I have no reason to buy all these comic books because you've not given me a reason to expect that you're ever going to offer me line work here.
Hmm.
So why on earth am I going to read all these comic books to keep up with what the Flash is doing this week? When, like, you've given me no reason to suspect that I'll ever have a shot at writing the Flash.
Right.
And the fact is, if somebody offered me, Ambush Bug or whatever the story was, it would take me a weekend to catch up and
Yeah.
learn everything I need to know about Ambush
Yeah.
Bug.
And I'm
You
sure
know,
there's like a Bible, as it were, that
No,
just
no,
kind of
I've
says
got a
what the
lot of friends. I've been in this business a
yeah,
long
but
time. I
even
just,
still, I'm sure there's like a little description of what it's about and what's been happening,
yeah.
so you don't even have to read the comics themselves.
Yeah, but
Um,
but my point is, I've
yeah,
got Mark Wade on speed
right,
dial.
right,
Okay, what do I need? What do I need Wikipedia for?
yeah, exactly.
This kind of thing. I got Tom
Yeah,
King.
yeah,
I got. We all know each other.
right.
It's like, hey, Tom, tell me everything I need to know about Adam Strange.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
that kind of thing. But it's just, and then at some point, familiarity starts working against you. It's like, well, you've been around for a long time. Once they start calling you legendary writer Christopher Priest, you're screwed.
uh-oh.
Now, like, I'm like, okay, look, I did this Deathstroke thing and we were nominated for an Eisner.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
And then a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, less than 2 years ago, we did this Superman thing. We got nominated for an Eisner. Now I'm doing like, The World to Come. It's one of Marvel's hottest books. What do I have to do to be taken seriously in this business? Or better yet, what do I have to do to stop being treated like a second class writer? I'm not a second class writer.
right,
Why am I being treated like a second class writer? Why is it every time you guys need something, I'm the last person you think of, which
yeah.
is a little, you know, it's a little bizarre, and so it's just, what is this iteration, this iteration's rationale for why I'm not qualified to work on these projects. It's a little frustrating, but
Yeah,
I do thank God for,
uh-huh.
the opportunities that do, and it's like Larry again,
Yeah,
not Larry, Denny O'Neil.
yeah,
He said to me, Jim, Denny himself learned this the hard way, that this is a tough business. Believe it or not, Denny O'Neil used to be a drunk,
hmm,
okay, which is kind of well known, but Denny O'Neil, brilliant writer, Green
hmm,
Lantern, Green Arrow, right? Batman, all that good
hmm,
stuff back in the 70s, was having a hard time getting work.
yeah,
Okay. And so like he'd come into the office and he'd see Julie Schwartz, and Denny told me, look, in this business, you come in, you take what they offer you. You go home, you do your best job that you can, you make sure you get it turned in on time. You say thank you, and you hope that they offer you the next piece of work. But there's no guarantees in this business, and you can't have this kind of entitlement or this expectation or whatever the story is.
yeah,
And I took that to heart, and I take it to heart now.
yeah,
I don't think that people are out to get me, or that, oh, they're not
right,
going to hire me
right.
because I'm black or whatever the story is. I just go, well, whatever the reason is, and it could be my sparkling personality because, I'm a people person. Um, Whatever the reason is, I'm grateful for, guys like, Nick Barucci, who has every confidence in me,
Hmm,
and has given me the world over there at Dynamite,
yeah,
and for, all these other folks that have just like, opened doors for me and made ways for me that, you know,
hmm,
40 years later, I'm still very busy and I'm still making a living in this business. So, I got nothing to complain about.
right.
Mark, excuse me 1 second. You don't have to go anywhere, but it occurred to me that I never plugged in my camera.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm
Actually,
on
what happened,
battery.
since we're kind of off topic right now, I was going to
There we
stop.
go.
I was going to interrupt at one point, but it fixed itself. At one point, you went like this, and you went out of focus, and for like
Oh,
5 minutes,
sorry.
you're out of focus. But
Am I better?
it came back. So it's like
Okay.
just by itself. So I was like, I didn't have to say anything and interrupt you. So because I
Oh,
wanted
sorry
you to
about
continue talking. So
Sorry,
anyway,
kids. I went out of focus. No,
um,
I just looked over and said, why is this wire dangling? I went, oh,
oh,
that's the power cord.
uh,
I'm on battery. Any day now, any
whoops.
minute now, the
Yeah.
camera's gonna die.
Whoops, whoops. Yes, I am very plugged in because yeah, we would be over by now if that.
Yeah,
Let's
me
see.
too.
Let's see. One thing I want to ask you about because I want to talk. I'll tell you what I was still talk about. A little bit about DC, a little bit about Dynamite, and then some of your other career things, and then we'll
Sure.
wrap up. But the one thing I do have to ask you about because I cherish this book as much as Crazy Magazines. Marvel No Prize book. How did that one come about? I love that comic.
Now that came from Shooter. I think that
Okay.
came from Shooter, and he gave it to Larry. I don't remember if Shooter specifically wanted me to do it,
Hmm.
but I'm pretty sure Larry and Shooter conspired to have me do it. I knew Stan. I adored Stan. I loved every minute I got to spend with Stan, and he was absolutely the guy that you think he was. I mean,
Mm.
it's like, you see these people who have this sort of public persona, and then in private, you discover that they're just really pricks.
Yeah.
Um, I knew Stan, over 40 years. By the
Yeah.
time we lost him, I'd known him that long.
Yeah.
And in those 4 decades, I personally have never seen the man lose his temper. Now,
Mm.
that doesn't mean he didn't lose his temper. I'm sure he did. I'm just saying I didn't see it.
Yeah.
And he's coming down the hall and it's like, hiya, Jim, how's it going? And he's that guy,
Yeah.
he'd invite me into his office and I'd plop down on his sofa, and now he's sitting there with like Jack Kirby original art, like the actual boards that Jack Kirby drew.
Mm.
And I got Stanley holding one of Jack's pages and he's teaching me sequential storytelling. I'm 17 years old. Okay. And I'm just going, this is just amazing. So I knew Stan personally. I knew his voice, and the idea was like, okay, we want you to kind of like put this in Stan's voice as if Stan is telling the story,
Mm.
and I wrote the introduction and we signed it Stan Lee, blah blah. So we got the book all done and we packaged it up and we shipped it out. We made a copy of it and sent it out to Burbank or wherever he was, because Stan was out there setting up the studio out in
Right.
out
The
in
Marvel
L.A.
Productions. Yeah.
So he sent it out there to stand for, so he could redline it, so he could edit and prove it. And when Stan saw the book, he hit the roof. And that might have been the first. I didn't personally see him get angry, but
You
I
get
was
angry.
told he didn't know anything about the book until it
Wow.
land, until he got it in the mail and he read this thing. He's like, "Wow, what the hell is this?" you know, and it was like, he was really. I think he wanted to write it himself.
Oh, okay.
I don't know that he would have the time to write it. Where are you going to find the time to write this thing?
Oh,
But I think he really was not happy that there was a kid who was emulating his voice like that. Eventually, though, he did sign off on it.
yeah.
I obviously I knew him for many decades after that. He
Yeah.
never once like smacked me or said, "Don't ever do that again."
Yeah.
But yeah, he gave Shooter. It was Shooter that he gave the grief to because
Wow.
he didn't know we were doing this project, which is very funny. But yeah,
Yeah.
that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. D- so one thing I don't know, I guess Marvel just kept track of all these errors and everything over the years. Is that how you knew about it, or did you have to literally go
No, we
through
we
all
hired
the
a we
books
hired a
and find it?
researcher.
Oh, okay.
We
Okay.
had I think I don't want to call a name because like I want to say Peter Sanderson, but I can't remember if Peter Sanderson was the DC nerd guy or if he was
Okay.
the Marvel nerd guy. But
Okay.
it was
I
it was
wouldn't know.
somebody
Yeah.
like once upon a time we would have hired E. Nelson Bridgewell,
Oh,
who
yeah.
who
Yeah.
Bridewell, I think, who knew everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Today you ask Mark Wade, you just
Y-
go just
Yeah.
one stop shopping. You go right to Mark,
Right.
right? But we went to, I think it was Peter. So somebody gave me this list, and then I sent it down to our librarian or whoever was running the archives there, and they pulled the film
Yeah.
and got all these little bits and pieces of art,
Right.
and then I decided how to put the jigsaw puzzle together, and then I wrote the script.
Oh, okay. Because, it's like some are easy to remember, like a misspelling of Pharaoh or something is what I
Yeah,
remember in the book. But like the one of them was like he had two left feet and everything. Who figures that
yeah.
out? I don't remember all of them off the top of my head, but I said this is incredible, that people figured this out over the
And
years.
of
But
course, Michael
mm,
Golden's upside down cover,
yeah, yeah,
beautiful cover,
yeah.
by Golden.
Mm.
Yeah.
So you moved to DC at one point. Why was that? Just money, or was there another incentive?
Well, I think at some point my contract, when I was under exclusive contract to Marvel, obviously I couldn't go anywhere.
Right.
At some point that contract expired. I don't remember if Marvel wanted to renew it or not. I'm not. My brain is fuzzy about that. But Denny O'Neil had left. Let's see. Yeah, Denny O'Neil had left Marvel
Mm-hmm.
and had gone over to DC. And Denny reached out to me and asked me, when does my contract expire at Marvel? And then he wanted me to do a book called The Unknown Soldier
Mm,
over at DC.
mhm,
So once the contract expired, I began, working at both companies. I was still writing Conan or whatever I was writing at Marvel, and then I started writing, some stuff for Denny, and I eventually ended up doing the Green Lantern series in Action Comics Weekly, which
that's what I
then led
remember.
to Emerald Dawn, Green Lantern Emerald Dawn, and some other
Mhm,
things over at DC.
mhm,
So I was freelancing, for DC for a while. Um, and then in 1988, I quit comics altogether. I just got kind of burnt out on it. And I was like, I just need to take a break and do something else. And I had been, I think I was living in Jersey, and whenever I had to go into the office, I was taking this bus. It was called Suburban Transit,
mhm,
and now it's called something else. But anyway, I was taking the bus back and forth, and I was chatting up one of the bus drivers. I always wanted to be a bus driver. So when I was a kid, I used to pretend to drive buses, and the MTA city buses in New
mhm,
York. I always wanted to drive one of those buses. And the driver said, "Well, why don't you go down to the company and apply? They'll train you." And a lot of some commuters would go and get trained as bus drivers. So instead of them buying a ticket and paying the bus company to take them to work every day, they would drive the bus and let the bus company pay them to commute into
Wow,
Manhattan
cool.
every day. So it was a nice little hustle.
Mhm,
So I went down so I put on like a suit and tie, and I typed up my resume, and I went down to the bus company, and they looked at me cross-eyed. They looked at me like I had just crawled out of a spaceship, you know, because you don't apply for a bus job in a tie with a and you don't bring a resume. They don't want to read your resume. I mean,
Well,
it's a
also your
blue collar.
resume's about comic books, not buses.
Yeah, well, there's that too, but it's a Teamster
Yeah,
job. You're
yeah,
applying for a Teamster job. You should
right.
go in there looking like a Teamster. You know,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
they turned me down. They said, no, we
yeah,
don't want to hire you. And I said, why? They said, well, because obviously you're having some sort of like midlife crises. And the minute things turn around in your business.
yeah.
You're gonna quit, and we don't want to waste the time and money to train you.
Mm,
And I assured them, ever since I was a little kid, I've always wanted to drive buses,
mhm.
and Mark, I loved that job. I loved that
Wow.
job so much. And I wish I was still doing it. And
Uh,
and 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 I regret ever leaving that job.
uh,
But what happened was, I think in 1990, Mike Gold was the director of development at DC. He was one of the executives at DC. And Mike, who used to run First Comics, and he helped develop Badger and some other stuff over there, and
mhm,
he came over to DC. So he was a high muckamuck at DC, and he reached out to me, and he wanted to bring me on staff. But I was happy driving the bus and doing freelance writing. I
mhm,
was still doing a little freelance writing.
mm,
Um, so I said, "Look, Mike, I'll take the DC job if the DC job pays more than the bus company." And Mike said, "Sold, not a problem. It's going to pay more than the bus company." And Mark, it did not pay more than
oh,
I took a pay cut,
uh,
to come to DC in
you lied.
1990. But that's how I ended up over there.
Okay.
And then once I was at DC, I think within a year or two was when Dennis Cowan reached out to me, and I became part of the group with Dwayne McDuffie and Derek Dingle and Michael Davis. I became part of the group that developed what became Milestone Media.
Milestone, yeah, yeah. Okay. And then other things you worked on over the years there was like Quantum and Woody Valiant at Valiant. Well, that's a Valiant as Quantum and Woody.
Yeah.
And then Justice League and Black Panther and things like that. And
Well,
then
I did Justice League Task Force
okay.
over at DC. I was always like the bridesmaid, and the thing about the task force is that the way the gag is supposed to work is, the main Justice League team was supposed to hand off a special missions. It was like G.I. Joe special missions, basically.
Okay.
When they had some sort of specific assignment, the task force was like the Navy SEALs of the
Oh, I
Justice
see.
League. Now,
Okay.
the problem is the guy writing Justice League, and I can't remember who that was. Whoever you are, you have to look it up. But he had no interest in playing ball or cooperating with this scheme. So
Mm,
he completely ignored us. So no one ever gave the task force orders. So I really wish that DC would release like a trade paperback of Justice League Task Force because you would see Mark Waid was writing it initially. I took it over from Mark Waid. Um, but you would see in my run on Justice League Task Force that they never went on a mission. They were always waiting for the mission. They never went on a
where is it?
mission.
Yeah.
It was like the Fantastic Four, in the Jack Kirby days,
Right.
where it was kind of all this sort of slice of life and this
Hmm.
group of people who were having trouble getting along, and then things would just kind of happen. It was more like Seinfeld, where like it didn't
Uh,
have a structured sort of like, go here and do that. It was just kind of like, it was a comic book about nothing.
yeah.
And It was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun with it.
That's funny. Uh, but the timing was right because wasn't Seinfeld on around the same time? So you could kind of,
Probably.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah. If you think about it. Yeah. Yeah. So it was just kind of like,
uh,
let's have a discussion about, let's have a discussion about, what did I see the other day? It was, salsa, like it's impossible for, someone with a Spanish accent to order seltzer because it sounds like salsa.
right,
I want some salsa with my seltzer.
right.
Yeah. So we do that kind of stuff with the,
Oh,
with the,
that's
with the
funny.
task force.
I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
check these out.
It
At
was
this
like a
point, I
hair
wasn't really
away from
re
Keith. It was a hair away from Keith Giffen and Mark DeMatteis's Justice League International.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't deliberately funny, but it was just kind of a family drama. But and no one seemed to notice that no one actually ever sent these people on a mission. They just happened to fall into stuff,
Yeah.
or stuff just happened to happen along the way.
Hmm. That's interesting. It's like old sitcoms where the dad never goes to work, but he had a
Right.
job, but
Yeah.
he
Yeah. He
never goes
talks
to work.
about, yeah, the steel mill, but we never see him go to work. Yeah.
Excuse, excuse me. I didn't get my cough button up there. One of the things that happened about 10 years ago was you won an Inkpot award. So how was that? What?
It was very gratifying. It was like a lifetime achievement award, which is like, sorry, we're not going to give you an actual award, but we recognize your contribution to the thing here. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. You know, it was kind of tough getting it home because I thought that they weren't going to let me bring it on the plane. I mean, you could use that thing for a weapon. It's really pointy,
Yeah, I've seen
you
one.
know.
Yeah.
But no, that was very gratifying, and I really appreciate that. I'm not a big awards guy. I would love to win an Eisner. I was
Yeah.
surprised that we were nominated twice.
Hmm.
Uh, the fact that Superman lost, actually, pardon the pun, that's actually the name of the book, Superman Lost. But Superman lost to a book called Pee Pee Poo Poo, um, ostensibly because people thought the title Pee Pee Poo Poo was funny, so they voted for that. And I'm like, yeah, but we worked really, really hard. We threw a lot of our soul into Superman Lost was an important book. And much like Spider-Man Wolverine, it was me my agenda with Superman Lost was to prove that my Superman will read like anybody else's Superman, that is just as credible and it's just as good or just as bad as anybody else's Superman, that you would read my Superman and kind of shrug your shoulders and go, yeah, so what? It's Superman, and I
Hmm.
go, well, that's the point, that a black man can write Superman as credibly as any of the white writers, because it's been a rare occasion
Hmm.
that a person of color has been allowed to handle Superman. So that was my point in doing it, and I thought we did a great job. I thought my artist Carlo Pagulayan did an amazing piece of work. The inker, the colorist, the letterer. This is the whole Deathstroke team was moved over to Superman, and
Hmm.
I think that we're the best band in show business, and I can't wait to work with them again. And God willing, that's going to happen within the next year or so. We're laying the groundwork for a comeback of we're putting the band back together, Mark, as soon as
Cool.
we can.
Cool.
Um, but I want to tell you, like I'm not really an awards guy, but
Yeah.
I was really disappointed that in my opinion, and I'm not taking anything away from Pee Pee Poo Poo. I'm sure that's a terrific book. Okay. But my disappointment is palatable because I thought we really rocked that
Yeah.
Superman story and it deserved,
Yeah.
that recognition.
Yeah. I totally I get it. You know, when it's something, yeah, you put your heart and soul in, or at least you feel strongly about, you know, and it's
Yeah.
like, and then you're overlooked for whatever reason. It's like, ah.
It
Um,
just felt like, that that the fans went for the gag
yeah,
instead of like actually doing their job, which is like well, let's recognize, you know, which and for all I know, maybe I'm just being arrogant, and maybe Pee Pee Poo Poo has, more integrity than Superman Lost, but I don't see it.
yeah.
So
Well, I'm one of those people that vote for those things, but I don't even remember that title, pee pee poo poo. But I might have voted for Superman Lost,
yeah.
you
Well, if you
know,
did, I thank you.
regardless. So, but I don't
Yeah.
remember. I'd have to look at what
Look it
else is up
up.
for.
It's out
Yeah,
there. Yeah,
yeah.
look it
What
up.
year was that again, roughly?
Well, this is 26, so 25 just passed. It was 24, I believe.
Okay. I'll have to look because I do vote on those things.
Hmm.
And I try to do my research if I haven't read it, you know, so at least I'm making an educated guess, not just saying, hey, that title sounds funny, burp, you know.
Oh yeah, and let me
Yeah.
just officially plug it. You kids out there, if you haven't read Superman Lost, I strongly invite you to do that. I never do this. I never plug my own work. I never beat my own drum. And I'm not saying it's a perfect book. I look at it and I see a bunch of mistakes I made and where I could have done better and whatever, but I salute my team. I feel like, Carlo Pagulayan and the rest of the team here that I feel like we're like the Chicago Bulls when Jordan was playing. I
Oh
think
yeah.
that we have a damn good band, and that book is a solid book that I strongly recommend immodestly, because I just think as a whole it's a really good comic book that maybe not enough people have read. So
Yeah.
it's in trade paperback. It's out there.
All right. I'll have to check it out too because I don't think I've read it either. I knew about it, but but you're talking about getting the band together, so let's shift over to music since you're talking about that. You've had quite a career in music too, and again you're under a different name there, Hollis Stone.
Hollis Stone. Yes, I'm
Yeah.
very popular in France. I don't know why.
Really? Wow. So
I don't
how
know
did you
why.
how did your career in music start out? And you've been actually quite successful, I think, you know, with it.
Well, no, I don't think if you go to my website, which is christopherpriest.com, and you poke around in there, there's a section on music, and there's all these really bad demos that I did over the years. Um, I think the closest claim to fame I have is there was a song called Easy Lover that was by Phil Collins and Philip Bailey from Earth, Wind and Fire. Do
Yeah.
you remember that song, Easy Lover?
Oh yeah. I like that
Yeah,
song.
okay. So the woman who produced that, her name is Lizette Wilson. She produced two tracks for me and
Mm.
did a great job. I didn't do a great job singing on them, but I had like I had like the band from hell. I think the drummer we used to play for is Frank Sinatra, and the bass player was he's the brother of Omar Hakim's brother from Weather Report. Omar Hakim is like arguably maybe the best drummer in the world. He's an
Hmm.
incredible drummer. And his brother Kabid is a bass player, and Kabid plays the bass nearly as well as Omar plays the drums. Kabid is a astounding bass player.
Hmm.
And on and on and on. And Mike Campelli and a couple other guys. So I had like real players now I was really nervous because Lizette was scary. You know, she was just scary. I'm just being honest with you. No offense, Lizette. She did a great job. She did way more than she had to do. I really appreciate that she did this. It was 1985. She may not even remember what I'm talking about. You
Yeah.
know, we were taping. We're going live to tape, so it's up there somewhere. These tracks are up there somewhere.
Hmm.
And when you hear it, it's a good mix. But just bear in mind that we're in the studio, but it's not a multi-track. Like usually with a multi-track, you can take your time, you can go back and repair errors, and you can polish it up. Yeah, no, this is the live band in the studio, everybody mic'd up, and we're actually doing the whole thing live and going right onto the master recording, and it was, that's probably the closest I came to. Now we did this record. I think the first record I did was in 1980. It was called Streetwise. I brought the band up to Marvel Comics and had meetings in Marvel's conference room on a
Mm,
Saturday because they
mm.
were stupid enough to give a teenager keys to Marvel Comics. What were you thinking? You know. So I'm
Is
up
it,
here on Saturday
oops,
and like,
is, is
huh?
is this before the reprimand from Marie Severin or after?
Oh, it's probably after, but
Okay.
yeah, but no, I was up to all kind of
You're
mischief with those
bringing up a
keys.
bunch of people up here. Who's?
Yeah, yeah,
Mm,
and then I was working for Larry, and
mm,
on my downtime, if I didn't have anything to do,
mm,
because there's times where the assistant really doesn't have anything to do, and you're waiting for work to come in, or you're waiting for something to finish being done anyway. I would pull out my notation book with musical staves, and I'd start writing lead sheets. And Larry's looking over my shoulder, going, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, we're recording this album. I'm writing out lead sheets for the guitarists, whatever, like that." And he was like, "Why are you doing that?" But basically, he was just saying, I forgot exactly how he put it, but it's like, bands don't work like that. Bands just wing it by ear. Just tell them
uh-huh.
what to play and they'll play it. You don't have to waste your time doing all that stuff. And he was right. And unfortunately I stopped doing that.
Yeah.
And because I stopped doing that, now I got really lazy. I can read music. I haven't had to read music in years, so I just go and a one and a two, and and I'll just
Yeah.
play it or whatever the story is. But yeah, so that first record, I wanted to know how to produce an album. I wanted to know the process all the way from writing the music to getting the wax pressed, and the album cover created. So it was called Streetwise. The photography was Elliot Brown, which is Marvel's, photographer. Jose Albello, who was
Mm,
a production assistant at Marvel.
mm,
He's the guy that did all the typesetting. He did the design work on the on
mm.
the on the cover. It was mastered by Bernie Grundman. Bernie Grundman is like the top master person, mastering engineer in the music business. And it's a terrible album. It's the
Oh.
worst album ever, you know. And now it's become this like this classic, this private press
Yeah.
uh rare collectible that sells for like $1,700 a
Ooh,
copy if
wow.
you can find one. And I don't have one. I
Oh.
don't have one. I'm routinely get inquiries about this. Do you got any more? You got any more? So, well, you can download the MP3 from my website. Well, we don't actually want to listen to it. We just want to, because it's a
Yeah,
rare
because it's
pressing.
money. Uh,
We want the collectible.
yeah.
And then I received offers from record companies that wanted to reissue it.
Yeah.
Why? Why? It's terrible.
Guess you could do a
Why?
record store day thing just for fun.
We were teenagers. We were teenagers. And Mark, real quick story is that there's the kid that was playing the bass. There was two kids. One kid was a keyboard player named Dinky Bingham. Dinky Bingham is now one of the top producers in R&B. He worked with Teddy Riley and one of these other guys. And he was like 15 or 14, something like that, and he's this incredible pianist and keyboard player. And then there was this guy, a friend of mine named William Wallace, who sadly passed away some years ago. And William was the bass player. William was 15 or 16 years old. By that time he might have been 17 or 18 because we were about the same age. And he was an incredible bass player. But at the time, my ears weren't trained enough. I couldn't hear it. I couldn't hear how good he was. And now when I play some of these tracks, I sound awful. There's a lot of flat notes with other people and things going on. But you listen to this kid on this bass and I go, wow, he was an amazing bass player. And that's what a lot of people were reacting to. So I received many inquiries about taking some of the tracks that William played on to remix them into disco or to different applications or whatever. And then over the years, I just produced a bunch of demos for people, and a bunch of other stuff. But I was never, I came close to being in the music business. I was approached by Motown, and then I was producing what my now ex-wife So she had a deal with Capital through, some production company, and we were getting her out of Capital, but we were getting interest from other labels. There was a brush with greatness, but I would never claim to have been in the music business. I circled the drain of the music business for
Yeah,
quite a
fair
while.
enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it leads me to ask, and there's one thing we haven't even covered, but I'll throw it in there too. So you've been in the comic book business, you've
Yep.
been in the music business, at least peripherally.
Yes.
Uh, what was the other thing that you did? Oh, you were a bus driver, and then
Yep.
you're an ordained minister. I haven't brought that
Yep.
one up, but I mean, is there? And you could talk about that, but I was like, is there anything that you still have in your bucket list that you haven't done in your life?
Probably not, to be honest with you.
Uh,
I think that hmm. I think now, like Joe Quesada and I were doing this book called The World to Come,
mhm,
and I give Joe all the praise about that book, which kind of annoys him. He's like, "No, no, we're a team." No, it's Joe. Joe was really the driving force behind. He's an incredibly creative guy,
uh-huh,
and I wrote a very simple story. Okay,
mhm,
two guys walk in a bar. Okay,
mhm,
and then Joe comes along and he rewrites the script. Goes, yes, two guys walk in a bar, and then Galactus, and then and then this happens, that happens, and then and then Lockjaw comes along, and Lockjaw, how did Lockjaw get into the story? So a lot of the wilder turns of the story, we have Joe to thank for that, and just the exquisite artwork that the guy has put into this thing, but. The World to Come is about legacy. It's about, Black Panther is he's an older guy, he's coming toward the end of his life, and the question is like, who inherits the toys? Who gets the vibranium? Who gets all of these inventions? Who gets his secret plans to stop Galactus if Galactus comes to Earth? And that kind of thing. But it's also about Black Panther, as I see him, is kind of a manipulative bastard who uses misdirection, and sometimes, unfortunately, he lies to his friends, like
mhm,
joining the Avengers to spy on them or
mhm,
whatever, or misleading his friends in one or another. Because Black Panther's mission is to protect Wakanda. He's a living embodiment of his ancestors. So his main job is to protect Wakanda, and
mhm,
and sometimes that's at the expense of his personal relationships, of even his marriage or things like that. So the World to Come is about those chickens coming home to roost,
mhm,
about him being faced with or suffering the consequences of 40 years of lying to his friends. And it's kind of knocking him down here. And I bring that up, Mark, because you asked me about his, my bucket list or whatever. You know, um, there's this great line in Star Trek where Jean-Luc Picard says a line like, I'm aware that there are fewer days ahead than there are behind.
mhm,
And that struck me a lot, because I'm going, you know, I feel like the same person that I was when Marie Severin dragged the 17-year-old Jim Owsley into her office. I am essentially the same. I've never matured. I'm still just a child at heart,
mhm.
you know. But people relate to me, because I look in the mirror and I see this old man looking back at me, and I go, "Who is that? And how did this happen?" But the fact is that there are fewer days ahead than there are. But now, don't get me wrong. I hope to keep working on this business for quite a lot, quite a while.
Mhm,
I would love to keep working this business as long as I can.
mhm.
But the world to come, it's about legacy. It's
Yeah.
about me. It's about Joe. It's about John Romita Jr. It's about, Mark Wade. It's about people of our generation, because the people who run the companies now are much younger, and they're looking for new and shiny. So we're always under threat. The veterans are always are always under threat,
Yeah. It's kind of too bad.
and it's kind of like, uh, how do you deal with that? How do you transition with that?
Mhm,
And coming to terms with that. So that's the subtext of it. Yes, I'm writing about Black Panther and about the larger cast of the Marvel Knights era, because there's a bunch of other characters that populate the book. But in essence, I'm talking about our generation of creators, Jimmy
Hmm.
Palmiotti and Joe Quesada and myself and, all these other folks here. So that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Right. Just to wrap it up, I usually just ask, are you making any personal appearances at conventions in the next few months? And if so, where? And if you have any sort of projects you want to plug, or if you just want to give out how people can get in contact with you if they want to ask you some questions.
Okay, so let's just try to work through all of that. All right, so there's a book called The Last Spartan,
Mhm.
which I always forget to plug, and I need to be better about that. Be on purpose about that. You can buy it at thelastspartan.com. I believe there's actually a website up on it. It was a Kickstarter that I did with the actor Tyler Mane,
Oh.
Sabretooth from Wolverine versus Deadpool. And many other films and TV shows. And the book is about human trafficking. It's about combating
Mm.
human trafficking, and it's done in cooperation with. Wow, now I'm screwing this up. Excuse me. It'll come back to me, but it's done in cooperation with a nonprofit that helps to recover, lost children or missing persons and things like that. So it's an important book. It's an original graphic novel. It's gorgeous. We worked really hard on it. That's out. That's available somewhere. And there's many different iterations of that. There's soft cover, hardcover. There's a single issue. There's the whole thing. Um, Beyond that, there's a bunch of stuff that I'm working on that I'm reluctant to mention because it hasn't been announced. And the
That's
last
fine.
time I did that, people got very pissed off at me. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to like learn from my
No, anything you
mistakes.
can
And
mention that is okay to mention is fine. Yeah. If it's
yeah,
still in secret, that's
uh,
fine.
beyond that, I have a website up, but it's kind of like an abandoned archive because I haven't had I just don't have time to work on it.
Hmm.
So like, the most recent like, update of that website is Deathstroke,
Mm.
which came out in 2017, you
Okay.
know. So I really haven't time to work on it, but there's a whole archive of like, well, Deathstroke and stuff that happened before Deathstroke that's up there. And
Hmm.
if you hit the contact button, that'll eventually get me an email. Just be patient because it's hard for me to get through. I get a lot of email. It takes a while for me
Hmm.
to get back through there. Um, and I don't know if I covered all of your questions, but I think all of those final questions. But I think
Any
that's it.
personal appearances like at conventions or
Oh
anything?
yeah, yeah, and I'm reluctant to mention personal appearances because there might be people looking to like beat me up or something.
Oh,
Um,
but do you make them? Some people don't make any at all. I mean,
Yeah, no,
okay,
I'm around. I think
okay,
that I work in cooperation with the Hero Initiative,
okay.
which is a charity that supports retired comic book writers and artists and helps them with their emergency expenses, medical expenses, things of that nature. So if you go to the Hero Initiative, I believe it's heroinitiative.org,
Hmm.
but just Google Hero Initiative to find their website. You'll probably see a bunch of creators up there, and there should be like a calendar of like where they show up.
Okay.
So, it goes through there. But yeah, I'll be doing, I'm doing more shows now than I used to do because uh basically my agent is sort of dragging me, kicking and screaming. I have the kind of social anxiety thing.
Hmm.
So like being around big crowds of people, it makes me a little
Yeah,
uncomfortable.
yeah,
I'm learning to deal with it a little bit more,
right.
so I'm doing a few more shows than I usually do. So yeah, and I don't have my calendar right in front of me, so I couldn't tell you anyway. But yeah, I'll be
Yeah,
doing a few shows this year.
okay. Yeah, I interview, of course, all sorts of people all over the map, and there's some that, oh yeah, I'll be here and here and here and here, and then there's other people it's like shows. I don't do shows.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
just,
because
yeah,
it's kind of exhausting and
yeah,
just how it all works. And for me to do a 3-day show in Oshkosh, for example,
yeah,
I have to take a week off of work,
yeah,
which becomes problematic both financially
yeah,
because I'm a writer, I don't make much money at shows. Artists can do sketches and they sell their work.
Yeah.
You know, writers, what I'm going to drag a bunch of scripts. You're going to buy a script. Why would
Let
you
me
want to
write
buy a script?
something for you.
I'll write something for you. Yeah, so writers, it's hard
Yeah.
for writers to make money at
Right.
these shows. So
Yeah.
that's one thing to bear in mind. And then I need a day to prep, a day
Mm.
to travel, 3 days at the show, a day to travel home, a day to recover from
Yeah.
all that stuff. That's a week off from work. That gets pretty expensive. So
Yeah.
bear that in mind, particularly with writers that that
Yeah.
that we're not really in demand at these shows to begin with. And
Right.
if we do go to the show, that usually is costing us quite a bit. So if you do see a writer at a show, if he's got some merch or if he's brought a bunch of books, whatever like that, rather than go, well, why are you charging me $20 for this graphic novel? Just kind of understand that like it's costing him money to be there,
Yeah.
usually.
And
Or
support
her,
the
excuse me, him or her. Sorry.
yes, and support these writers. I'm a writer
Yeah.
too, so support the
Yeah.
writers.
Yeah, please do. Yeah. I try not to, you know, that's the other thing is that I'm going to, I'm Mark, I'm utterly convinced that I'm going to end my life sleeping under a bridge because
Oh.
I'm not real good with money. And
Mm.
and when I go to these shows, my philosophy is I'm so grateful that you bought the thing in the first place
Yeah.
that, I will charge you something because I have to. I don't have much choice, but it's usually something pretty nominal.
Mm.
Like it's typical. I'll charge you $5 for a signature or something like that.
Yeah.
But I really do appreciate the fans, and I mean that and sincerely. That it's just amazing to me that you folks have like basically paid my rent for 4 decades, and
Mhm.
that's phenomenal and awesome. And the last thing I want to do is like, start, taxing you on the other end, and
Yeah.
so if anything, I try to engage, I try to spend a little time and engage in conversation, and get
Mm.
to know you a little bit like that.
Hmm.
And try to make it as painless as possible for you to get whatever it is you're trying to get at my table. But I'm not really making money there. So I'm not really, I'm a cheap guy. Come by my table. I'm a cheap guy.
Well, I'm glad you engaged us today with your conversation. You had some great stories and everything like that. So if there's nothing else, any final words of wisdom, or we'll just wrap up at this point?
No wisdom, but thank you for having me. I had a great time. Good conversation. Good questions. Thank you for
Well,
the
thank you.
questions.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Christopher. It's like I finally nailed it down and got you to talk to me about this. But, I admired your work at Crazy for a number of years and, other things. And so just wanted to get to know you for an hour here. So I guess that wraps it up for another episode of the Fun Ideas Podcast. This is your host, Mark Arnold, and we will see you next time.